Wonderful. Good evening, YouTubers. It's a bit cloudy tonight, so I'm not going up on the roof to stargaze with the telescope. But I have had a chance to look at that crash, that air crash again in South Korea. Now, having re-watched a lot of the footage from various different news companies, and having Googled the aerodrome on Google Earth and seen which angle in relation to the control tower what the pictures actually came from, I have deduced that runway is 9,000 feet long or thereabouts, which is more than ample for landing that aircraft on a belly landing. And I've just been watching Sky News where they've got some aviation experts who's shocked that they build a wall at the end of the runway. And that's what killed everybody. Well, yes, it was what killed everybody. I mean, you don't need to be an aviation expert to see that. The problem wasn't the wall at the end of the runway. The problem was the pilot didn't land at the beginning of the runway. Right? He didn't even land in the middle of the runway. He landed at the end of the runway because he was coming in too fast. Now, when an aeroplane comes in to land, you remember the old aeroplanes, they used to have a tail wheel at the back and they had two wheels at the front. These are called tail wheels. Okay? And you have to land them at the right speed because that's pretty slow. Okay, as slow as they're going to go without stalling them when you crash. So you're coming in as slow as possible. And you don't need flaps, okay, to achieve this. Now, there was no flaps on that aircraft. So the gear hadn't come down and the flaps hadn't come down. So it's a flapless approach. Every pilot practices a flapless approach, okay, to get your basic pilot's license. It's a really easy thing. It should not have been a problem in that aircraft. Okay, so anyway, getting back to the tail wheels, you come in at your correct landing speed, which is relatively slow, okay? Because if you go too slow, you stall, you drop a wing. You don't want to do that. But if you're going too fast, when you touch down, you go boing, and you bounce back into the sky. And then you try and bring it down again and you level out and you're touching down, you go boing and you go back into the sky and they go boing, boing, boing. And then remember the film, The Battle of Britain? They can teach monkeys to fly better than that. And it was more so evident with a tail wheel, okay? But today you've got nose wheel aeroplanes, but the same rules apply really. You want to be landing at the right speed because if you're going too fast, you will bounce. And if you try to hold the aircraft off just above the ground and keep pulling back on the stick slowly, 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 you're not letting it climb. It's reducing speed, reducing speed, reducing speed. And then when it's going slow enough, it will touch down. But by this stage, he's reached the end of the runway. Okay, so he should have been doing his approach at the right speed to begin with, and he should have plonked it down on the numbers at the beginning of the runway. It would have skidded to a halt and the fire brigade would have been there and got everyone off. Now, I personally have been in the back of an aeroplane. When we went to pick up Denny Rowland's Wilga, okay, from Sywell, he bought it off this guy, I can't remember his name. But Sywell was sort of halfway between Shoreham and wherever this guy was up north. So he'd already done the deal to buy the Wilga. So this guy had flown it to Sywell, where we'd filled it up, and then we were going to take it from Sywell and fly back to Shoreham. Now, we'd taken a PA-28 up there, which is it's a learner plane. And Denny had said to me, "Are you sure you can fly the Wilga?" I said, "Yeah, of course I can. No problem." "Have you got tail wheel time?" I said, "Yeah, of course I have." But his other friend, I'm not going to mention his name because it's quite an embarrassing story for him, but he knows who he is. And he was a flying instructor, so he should have known better. Anyway, I'm sat in the back because the plan was we'd fly the Cherokee up. It was a Warrior, PA-28 Warrior. We'd fly it up there, land, and this lad who's the flying instructor, who went on to become an airline pilot, by the way, he would get checked out first. And if he got checked out okay, and checked out means, because he's obviously qualified to fly the plane, but a checkout, if you haven't flown a tail wheel before, you know, you really need to be checked out. And So this guy got in the Wilga, and I'm sitting there like this thinking, well, I'll have to fly the Warrior back. But before that happened, I was sitting in the back. Denny was in the front, and this guy, this airline pilot, was sat so I'm sat in the back thinking, oh, here we go. Anyway, we got to Sidewell, and I've never ever sat in the back of an airplane since, apart from EasyJet. I just refuse to get in. If someone offers me a back seat in a light airplane, I just say no thanks. You're all right, mate. I'm fine. And he was going downwind, and then you turn and land on the runway, and he overtook this microlight, and he turned too early, so he's too high, and he's got the power back, and he's dropping, and you should land a Piper Warrior 55 knots, something like that, and he's coming in at over 80, 90 knots. So of course he gets down over the fence, flares, and he did exactly what that guy just did in the airliner. He just floated and floated and floated all the way down the runway, past the halfway mark, get into the 3/4 mark. He touches. Now he should have just powered up and gone around and tried again. That's what you should do. That's what that guy should have done. But that was his second attempt, apparently, from what I've heard on the news. Anyway, no, he tried to stay with it and braking hard, and of course wet grass, plane sliding around, and normally at the end of an airfield there's a fence, okay, especially a grass strip. There's usually a fence like you'll find on a farm, or a hedge, and there'll be a road on the other side of it, and he just stopped in time before he ploughed through the fence with the aircraft. And I'm sitting in the back thinking, no, never again, never getting. I'd rather get the train home than get in the back with you flying it, honestly. And he just shrugged it off because he's the big I am. He's the trainee airline pilot. He's got his frozen ACPL, and he's a flying instructor with one of the flying clubs, so he should have known better. But let's put it this way, my only excuse I can think of for him was he used to drink a lot. Anyway, we're parked up at the flying club bar, and we're having cups of tea and a breakfast or something like that. And this guy, can't remember, was it Richard? Can't remember his name, but he was the previous owner to Denny Rowland of Golf Bravo Tango November Sierra, which was the Wilga, the PZL 108. And he said, okay, well, who's going to get checked out then? And Ross goes there. Oh, I've said his name. Anyway, this guy gets up and he goes, yeah, here we go. I'm a flying instructor, I'm an airline pilot, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, so we got in, and as soon as he put the power up, the thing ground looped on him. It went round. And normal aeroplanes don't do that. That's why they don't have tailwheel aeroplanes anymore. Anyway, the other guy must have taxied it for him for a little bit, and then he had another little ground loop a bit further down, and then he got himself to the end of the runway, and when he took off he was all over the place. He was up on one wheel, it was all over the place. And cut a long story short, the guy failed him. He said, no, I'm sorry, but I'm not checking you out to fly this aeroplane. You fly it at your own peril. And he got out the airplane shaking like this. And his palms were sweating, and he goes, that fucking plane's dangerous. That's what he actually said to me, that plane's dangerous, it's going to kill someone. And I thought, well, only if you don't know what you're doing, mate. You can't be expected to just jump in a helicopter and fly it without being trained, can you? And the Wilga's the same. It's a very slow aeroplane. Has a low takeoff speed. It can take off. It can climb steep. It can fly slowly. It's a tail wheel. It's a short takeoff and landing. Looks a bit like a Lysander, but it's Polish, and it's not quite. The engine's not quite as big. It was great fun to fly. I got about 150 hours on it. In the end, someone crashed it in Poland. Some Polish guy bought it off him, took it back to Poland and stuffed it. Again, you can be a very experienced pilot and they'll still catch you out if you're not on the ball. And you can't sit back and go, well, I'm an airline pilot, I'm never going to crash, because you will. You will. Okay? And that's what happened to this guy. So, I mean, he said to me, well, come on, we'll check you out. Then I went in, checked out, landed right at the beginning of the runway and stopped. And he went, yes, okay, let's do that again. And this time, could you land a bit further down the runway? And I said, how far? Whereabouts do you want me to land? You know, just show me where you want me to land and I'll land there. Because these things stop quite quickly, you know, you get them down and you can stop. So you can put it in the middle if you want, put it 2/3. I mean, you tell me, where do you want me to land it? And he's like, yeah, he's okay, he's checked out, he can fly it. And that's it, and I flew it back. And Roscoe flew the PA-28 back. You could see his face, but it was a lot faster. The PA-28 could do about 110, maybe 120 knots. And the Wilga couldn't do anything like that. It was really slow. It was 80, 90 at the most, I think. You know, it was a big radial 9-cylinder engine. And yeah, we flew it back from Sywell. And the nub of the story is, if you come in too fast and too hot, that's what they call it, when you're coming in too hot, you're going to bounce, you're not going to land, you're going to bleed all that airspeed away by using up runway that you preciously need. And then you're going to go off the end. I mean, it's happened to me once, you know, when I was a student pilot. I'd only just passed my test and I was a bit heavy. And there was no wind, wet grass, you know, and you think, oh, we'll come in a bit fast. All these are a recipe for disaster. And I managed to stop, luckily, before went crashing through the fence at the end. And you think to yourself, I'm never going to make that mistake again. And I went back to the flying school. I was already qualified pilot, and I said to my flying instructor, Richard, right, I want to do short field landings. I'm going to pay you, obviously, for your time. And we went off and we did short field approaches, short field circuits with 2 stages of flaps, loads of power, coming in at 55 knots over the fence and touching down right at the beginning of the runway. And unfortunately, you see, airline pilots don't really train like that. I mean, you might get the odd one that's keen, who's got a proper aeroplane in the hangar at his local flying club, and he'll do some proper flying. But airline flying is all like done by numbers, done by the book. This is the speed, this is what we do, this is what we do in case it goes wrong. Da, 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 da. So unless you've got someone who's actually really a proper hands-on stick and rudder pilot, you know, when it comes to a situation like that, right, you've got no gear, you've got no flaps, and he's coming in, he's done the right thing, he's gone around, because he's come in too fast, too high, whatever, he's gone around and he said, right, we're going to come in again. And you just got to take your time, go out nice and long and bring it in and get that airspeed down, because it doesn't make any difference whether you've got flaps down or not. Okay, all it makes a difference to is the attitude of the aircraft. So the aircraft's going to be coming in at a much flatter approach. If you put flaps down, you'll alter the angle of the aircraft and you will induce more drag. But it's not like a brake. You can't think of flaps as brakes. They will slow you down, they will induce drag, but they alter the angle. And if, you know, you can't let the aircraft drop below a certain speed, so you might have to increase a bit of power. But you won't have to do that so much without flaps, because it will glide. These things will glide. And you've got to get used to doing, I mean, who does glide approaches in 757s? You know, nobody. It's the only thing you'd ever do is practice it in the simulator, but you should practice glide approaches every time, without power even, you know, and bring it in, no gear, doesn't matter. You're watching the numbers at the end of the runway, the piano keys, and you've got to bang it onto the ground right after the piano keys, you know. Boom, you've got to have the speed right, because otherwise it's going to bounce. And it's going to bounce, and it's going to bounce, and you want it. And people have often said to me, you know, if you did a belly landing, would you land on the tarmac or on the grass next to the runway? And, well, it would depend on the day and the date and the weather and the wind. And there's be a lot of other factors that come into that, because landing on the tarmac, I would imagine would, because I've never done it, I would imagine would cause lots of sparks and you're more likely to have a fire. So perhaps landing on the grass is more likely to slow the aircraft down and stop it quicker. So my option would probably be on the grass next to the runway. right at the beginning, it literally parallels the runway, almost on it. That would probably do a lot more damage to the underside of the aircraft, but that's not your concern as an airline pilot, right? Your concern is the safety of your passengers. That's the primary objective, is to get them down safely. And if you've floated all the way down the runway because you've come in too fast and you've passed the halfway mark, there's no way you should continue that approach. You should power up and go around. And you certainly don't leave it until it's touching down at the end of the runway. And there was nothing wrong, didn't appear to be anything wrong with the landing. He actually got the aircraft down in one piece, but he just ran out of runway because he'd ballsed it up. And then it spanked into that big wall at the end of the runway. And this aviation expert from Sky News is going, absolutely outrageous, shouldn't have a wall at the end of the runway. Well, what do you think is going to be at the end of the runway? Probably buildings, industrial estates, motorways at the end of Gatwick's runway, innit? There's a railway line, there's all kinds of things. So the point is, if you haven't got enough runway left to land on it, you power up and go around if you can, unless you've got some sort of control failure as well, and then it's going to be a disaster. And I don't know, I wasn't there. Okay, I'm only going off what I've seen on the news, the same as everybody else. So these are just my initial feelings about that, but I see absolutely no reason why you can't put a 757 down fully laden with passengers without wheels and without flaps on a 9,000 foot runway. Not a problem at all. I could do it on the simulator if you want, get it working. I might have to get X-Plane back up because I'm having a lot of trouble with Microsoft Flight Simulator, the new one. I have downloaded it, but it's so complicated. But yeah, perhaps I'll do it and prove it. The runway at Gibraltar is 6,000 feet long. And I could do it there. Not a problem. So I'm thinking that if he had no control issues, all the controls are working properly, the throttles are working properly, it's pilot error, in my opinion. But it's too early to say because we need the full investigation to take place. But that would be my initial suspicions. And if you recall, I did an initial analysis of the Spitfire crash, the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, and we had a squadron leader. Long was unfortunately killed in that from neck injuries. I made a pre-investigation analysis of that, and I think he tried to do a dead man's turn and he stalled it into the ground. But again, you can't say these things. You got to just wait until the official crash investigation people say, yes, he tried to do a dead man's turn, stalled it into the ground. You think, oh, did he? Oh, right, okay, yeah. But it's inappropriate apparently to comment early. But I do comment early because you see things happen and you talk about it, don't you? You comment on it and you think, well, that's what I think happened. We'll have to wait for the investigation, don't we, to see what really did happen. But an instructor should know better. But I know instructors, as I've just mentioned, who should have known better. Anyway, thanks for watching.